Hi, folks. That tone indicates that it is 10 a.m. I want to welcome everybody to this block of different talks. We're going to have two of them. I'm on Pacific time, so 10 a.m. Pacific. I believe it's 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Uh, the 10 a.m. is Wikidata Affinity Group Introduction to Wikidata for Entity Management. We're also going to have an 11 a.m., again, Pacific Standard Time, Discovery and Linked Data Opportunity and Questions. So for the first, we're welcoming three presenters. I'm going to introduce them very briefly, and then I'm going to let them actually introduce the information that they're going to lead you through, the subject of their talk. So first, I would like to welcome Susan Radowski. She is a metadata management program coordinator at Harvard Library at Harvard University. I'd also like to welcome Kyla Jemison, who is a metadata librarian at the University of Toronto, so a fellow Canadian. Working with special formats, she's interested in music and audiovisual cataloging. She's also interested in how metadata affects discovery. I'd also like to welcome Alex Young, who works as the open knowledge specialist at the University of Toronto Libraries. He helps people to edit, to work, learn, teach with, and coordinate projects through open knowledge tools like Wikidata. So it sounds like we have an incredibly accomplished crew who are going to take us on a little journey today, and I will cede the floor to them.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I will welcome everyone and thank you for sharing the slides, Kyla. I opened a bunch of other tabs for all the links, but I think I can't share slides while you are. So I'll just say welcome everyone to our Introduction to Wikidata session with an emphasis on entity management. And next slide. Alex is the open knowledge, but first, hello. Alex is the open knowledge specialist at the University of Toronto Libraries Communications Department. And I am the metadata management program coordinator on the metadata management project strategy team at Harvard Library. Kyla is metadata librarian at the University of Toronto Libraries in the metadata services department. And there's a cute kitty. You will be able to look at these slides later and open all of these pages. And thank you, Jessica, for adding the link in the chat. That project page is for what the Wikidata Affinity Group has been doing all year as our new format, which is what we're calling a project series. These project series are every other week on Tuesday at 12 Eastern time. And since there are 4 sessions, that extends over 2 months. This is the kickoff for this current project series. And we also have a link to our Etherpad, which is the native Wikimedia Etherpad, which we are using for notes. We've moved as far as possible from Google Suite and are using native Wikimedia apps when we can. I think we also have a breakout room for help with any technical problems you might have when you're trying to set up your Wikidata account, for instance. Do we have a breakout room?
It doesn't look like it.
We don't currently.
But we can just do it in the chat, maybe.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So next slide is fine.
Okay. Sorry, too many things happening here.
Yeah, sorry, Kyla.
That's okay. There we go. Better
Okay,
arranged.
so the first thing we're going to do with this adorable graphic leading the way is to create an account in Wikidata if you don't already have one. So our next slide will get us started. Okay, so when you go to either Wikipedia or Wikidata, and I suggest using wikidata.org today, since that's what we're going to be working in, you should see at the top right the option to create account. And it's pretty easy. You create a username and a password. You confirm the password. It's optional to add your email address. And then you may have to do one of these CAPTCHA things. So first of all, I'm wondering how many people here don't have Wikidata accounts already or Wikimedia accounts. I won't be able to see the show of hands, but maybe one of our moderators can. Mark and others, are you seeing
Yeah, I'm
any
seeing
hands?
some hands popping up. It looks like
Okay.
3 or 4 of them have gone up so far.
Okay. So why don't you take a crack at creating this account and let us know in the chat if there's any problems. And Kyla, Alex, please chime in if there's anything I've
Yeah.
forgotten.
I see Alex has posted a link to create an account in the chat, but it says it only went to hosts and panelists, so I don't know if that is showing for everybody.
I'll repost
I
it for everyone.
okay, I don't have the option to change mine from hosts and panelists to anything else, which is
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
odd, but that's fine.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if let's go on to the next slide, and if anybody
Yeah.
has a problem, please do sing out in the chat. And once you have your account, if you can go ahead and log in, it's very important with this work to make sure that you're logged in before you do anything, because we have all, and I many more times than once, done a huge complicated edit and then discovered that it didn't take because I wasn't logged in. So, so go ahead and log in, see if there's any problems, please say so in the chat and we can maybe go on
Yeah.
if there are no questions or problems.
We'll give it those awkward 10 seconds for people to chime in.
Thanks, Jessica.
Okay. It's looking good.
All right, I'm gonna mute myself and give it over to Kyla.
Okay. Hi, thanks, Susan. So we're going to cover a little bit of an introduction to what is Wikidata, and then move on to some other activities. Okay, so Wikidata is a database, and you can think of a database as a bag of things, or a bag of information where each thing or piece of information is related to each other. It's also a free database. There's no cost to using it, which is part of its appeal for EMCO here. And it's completely open. Anyone can add or edit to Wikidata after creating an account. Within the library world, it's what we call a linked open data database or a triple store, which just means that the data is structured in a particular way that we'll get more into soon. And whether you work in a library or archives or other cultural heritage institution, these aspects of Wikidata are very attractive. It's free. We don't have to maintain or run the technology. It's collaborative, so we can work together to create and enhance the data. And it's also structured linked data, which means we can ask the Wikidata database complex questions about the topics or things described in it that you can't necessarily ask in something like a relational database. And that's a whole section about learning how to construct Wikidata queries, which is a future session, perhaps. We don't have that one scheduled yet, but we've done it in the past. The LD4 Wikidata Affinity group just came off a great series about Sparkle queries and the graph split. And we will talk more about how to find more of those resources at the end of this workshop. With regards to the database being open, There are some restrictions about what you can add to Wikidata. It is not as restrictive as Wikipedia, um, but in the notes for this slide, we have a link. I think we deleted the notes. We will make sure this is clear somewhere else. I will pop that in there. Um, the notability criteria for Wikidata, which is simply that the thing that you are adding to Wikidata must contain at least one valid site link to a page on Wikipedia, Wikivoyage, Wikisource, Wikiquote, Wikinews, Wikibooks, Wikidata, anything in the Wiki universe there. Or that the thing you are adding to Wikidata must refer to an instance of a clearly identifiable conceptual or material entity. The entity must be notable in the sense that it can be described using serious and publicly available references. You can also add things to Wikidata if they fulfill a structural need. For example, if you need to add information to Wikidata that makes the other information or statements or items more useful, you can create those. Some other useful things about Wikidata is that it's language independent, which is helpful for international groups. Everybody can use it. It is huge. It has over 96 million records. And it has started to be used as a hub for other open data sets. So there are web applications built on top of Wikidata or tools that pull information from Wikidata because the information is free and structured and open for reuse. It also has a very fast query technology behind it, so you can ask questions to Wikidata and it responds relatively quickly compared to some other traditional databases that we might have experienced. So to showcase what the structured data of Wikidata looks like, our colleague Alex Wong, who's a librarian at York University here in Toronto, made this visualization of the Wikidata bag of things and what the language independency looks like. So the example here is Viola Desmond, a Black Canadian activist. The query here shows some of the Wikidata things associated with her. She's a human. Her place of birth is Halifax. She received an award of the Canada's Walk of Fame, and so on. And this bag will just keep expanding because each data point is linked to other data points in Wikidata as well. Um, awesome. Yes, the point to remember here is that you could click on Halifax to know more about it as a place, say. And just as these labels are represented in English on the left, they're the same links basically on the right. So the property place of birth and the property lieu de naissance, I don't actually speak French, have the same ID number within the Wikidata structure. So they are considered equivalent. The uh, identifier for Halifax has the same identifier no matter what language we're looking at as well. This means that the data isn't actually repeated because it gets stored in a language agnostic way by using these identifiers, so that almost everything can be translated relatively automatically, which is really useful when you think of Wikidata as a free and open global tool, and also for working with data sets that include multiple languages. So from this visualization, I hope you can start to get a sense of the triples that this data is structured in. There are three parts to the statement. Viola Desmond has place of birth Halifax. And these three-part statements are what we call semantic triples. Semantic triples are the building blocks of linked data consisting of a subject, predicate, and object. So here we have Margaret Atwood as the subject, and then as our predicate is the author of Handmaid's Tale, the novel. And these statements are almost always reciprocal, so we could also say the subject, The Handmaid's Tale, predicate has author, object, Margaret Atwood. So they go back and forth. These subjects and objects can then be connected to other subjects and objects using different predicates, building an enormous interconnected web of data. So this example here is centered around The Handmaid's Tale, but there are so many semantic triple examples that we could make with almost any work or item or concept. And I'm going to hand it over to Alex to talk about what this looks like in Wikidata.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Susan and Kyla. And just like Rory said, it is a lot of fun. If you go onto the Wikidata pages, you'll pretty much see that each page is just an item. So whatever you see on a single page of Wikidata, that's like all the descriptions kind of contained within. We're going to do this in like two parts. So first we'll kind of see the different sections of a page, and then we'll go into each section of the page and kind of take a look at what's in there. So let's say you opened an item. Actually, that's fantastic. Thank you, Jessica. Like we have the Wikidata page right here. It would look something like this. So on top, you see like a whole bunch of labels and description, and then you'll see a bunch of statements, like, and there'll be like end statements. And there might be one, honestly, depending on how developed an item is. That'll be a chance for you to add some stuff if you see new stuff. And then if we can go to the next slide. There's also identifiers. So there's a separate section for just pretty much becoming the clearinghouse for all of the different sorts of identifiers that we might conceivably use in libraries. And then there's a final section, which we won't go into too much detail today, but this is basically to connect the other Wikimedia project, like links in as well. And next slide. So the labels and description part, anything that you see displayed up top here is dependent on the language. So like Kyla said, it's language agnostic. So there's ways to display it depending on what you've set your Wikidata language to. So if I were viewing this page and it happens to be that the item that I was looking at should read differently in French, then that's what it would show up top here. So this is the label. Next one is the QID. So as we know, Wikidata is supposed to be machine readable. This is sort of the machine human translation little tidbit that it does here. And that's the URI that you would see usually on the page. So it's the Q code or the QID. You'll see a string of numbers followed by the Q. Next slide, please. And this is the description. So again, depending on the language, you can fill it in differently. Canadian politician in this case. And then this is the alias. So these are pretty much the AKA or like the alternative names. We can elaborate as many as we need really, because sometimes it really helps to have the different ways of searching. Okay, and Kyla just gave an awesome description already of the semantic triples. So I won't go into too much detail here, but as you can see, this is the structure. So as we mentioned, the item is the page or the thing itself. And then the statements break that down into the property and the value. So the property might be Jean Augustin is a human being. So the property would be the instance of, and then human. This is the usual property like P31, pretty much in conceivably any item on Wikidata that kind of typifies the thing. Another example might be occupation. That's the P106 property. Each of these codes, by the way, are the unique identifiers for the property itself. So obviously occupation or the instance of is the human label for that property. And then it just has like the little strings of numbers and definitions to go with it. And then the value that it gives would be politician. There's also school teacher, activist, etc. So if we have the item right here, I'm going to fly through this one. That's the property, as you can see. So just zoom in on the left side. And then the last section would be, these values, as I mentioned. Okay, so this is the little gotcha moment in Wikidata, where we talk like basically any session that you go to, probably we'll talk a whole bunch about semantic triples, and it actually ends up being a quad structure. We'll follow that little tidbit as a bookmark, but there are actually also qualifiers and references. But what that does let us do is it allows us to further zoom in within the triple structure. So in this case, for example, Jean Augustin has archives at, might be UTARMS. And the qualifier for that would allow us to specify like either details or constraints that further define that item or like put conditions to the value that's given. So in this case, it might be a reference. It's basically the same structure for both, except one is like inventory number, describe a URL, and another actually comes in as a reference here. So same thing pretty much for other fields as well. Like a property might be award received, and then it might be 100 accomplished Black Canadian women. And then somebody might want to specify it was also at this point in time, so 2018. If you're wondering how on earth do I know where to find all these qualifiers and references and the kinds of options we have, we will get to that part quite soon. And finally, little tidbits here. So there's often these flags or error symbols. Great rule of thumb is just click on them. They will just flag for you if it's specific constraints that's prompting the flag, then it'll tell you. So it's ready to help you along sort of on the editing journey. And if it says, let's say, citation needs constraint, it says, well, actually, if the statement's nominated for it is the thing that you're trying to add, then we want you to add that with at least one reference. So it's usually reminders to make sure that the data is kind of complete or like has whatever is required for it to stand. So that's the purpose of the flags and errors, and you'll usually see it to the right of the values that are given. And then we've moved on to the identifier section of like, remember the big page breakdown. So we're probably familiar with a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in front of our eyes right now. So the VF ID, ISNI, so these are the usual standard identifiers and the place for us to use this as a clearinghouse. And I'll hand back to Kyla.
Okay, so now we're going to do an actual activity. By that, I mean, I think you all are going to do an activity. Jessica has already shared the link in the chat. Amazing. We need something to work with because not everybody comes to a workshop like this prepared with something to work on. So we've put together a spreadsheet of people who have a date of death included in their Wikidata item, but that information is not cited. But these people also have an LCCN number identified in their Wikidata item. And the Library of Congress should have some information about their date of death, or at least indicates that they are famous enough that we should be able to find a source citing their date of death if we do a quick internet search. So take a look at this spreadsheet. Please put your initials in the first column to indicate who you'd like to work on. I did one as I was making these slides. I worked with Julia Wanderley, maybe. I'm not sure which way she said her name. She was Argentinian, I believe. So maybe Julia. So that's the example we'll see in the slides, but please go ahead and take a look and grab somebody for yourself to work on. If you start working on somebody and you're not getting the information you need or you can't find it for whatever reason, just pick somebody else. There should be enough names for everybody to be picky. So that's that. Okay, and Jessica shared the link in the chat, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. So this is about navigating around Wikidata. If we only know the person's name, we can just search for them in the top screen here, where it says search Wikidata. Once you search there, it will take you into an advanced search where you can sometimes specify that you're only looking for entities or only looking for properties, things like that. But in this case, I'm pretty sure, I'm just going to double check here, that I included the links in the chat. In the spreadsheet, sorry. Yes, so you can just click straight on the link if you'd like, but if you want to practice searching, go ahead and copy your person's name and take a look at that in the search here. Yes, yeah, the search is also linked here if you want to go straight to the more advanced search page here. Okay. Please say something in the chat if you're having trouble locating your person. But if not, we're gonna charge on ahead. Okay, so for me, I saw that I chose this person and I searched for her name and I found that there is, as I expected, an article for her. So I clicked on that. Sorry, item, not article. I mix up my terminology sometimes. So we're looking for the item for Julia Wanderley. And then I click on her name to take me to her page. There we go. I think I had a duplicate slide in there. That's unnecessary. Okay. There we go. Okay. Yes, so when I look at her page, we can see a lot of the anatomy that Alex just talked us through. We see the label up at the top, Julia Wanderley. We see her QID number. We see a default for all languages name and then the name in English and various Englishes and French, and there are more entered languages as well. Um, if anybody is having trouble finding their person, again, just say something in chat. We've got folks to help out. But I'll keep moving. Okay, so now I have entered her page. Um, I can see these little edit buttons next to a number of just kind of all over the page in different places. So if I click on the edit up here at the top, it will let me edit this top section. If I click on edit next to a statement, it will let me edit that statement. There are also little notes where it will say plus add reference, plus add value. Some will also say plus add qualifier, I think, or you might already have to be editing, I think, to see that one actually. But for today, we are going to be entering a reference for our dates of death. We could have picked anything. I just figured it was easier to find people who had already passed on, and it is safe to enter information about their dates here. So in most of these cases, I suspect that the Library of Congress authority record will have information about this date of death that can be used as our reference. Likely any of the authority databases will have more information about these people. So if you prefer to use not LC, if you want to use VF or a different national library, please feel free to take a look there. I am just most familiar with Library of Congress, so that's what I went with here. So if we scroll down to the bottom of your person under the identifier section that Alex highlighted earlier, you should see one called Library of Congress Authority ID. And if you click on where it has your person's number, it will take you to the Library of Congress linked data service, and where you can find a little note about where they found their information about this person. And so in this case, it tells me that she died April 5th, 1918 in Curitiba. So that's useful information that I can use to cite this. In an ideal world, it might be better if I could cite the book that this note is getting its information from, but for the purpose of keeping this exercise manageable, we're just going to cite the LC site. So you should have two tabs open, one with your Wikidata item and one with the LC information there. And then we'll click on Add Reference. At this point, Wikidata will pop up a little form for us to fill in. It will show you a number of common properties used to create references, but there are others as well. So today we're going to put in 3 statements. Stated in, which allows us to say what resource we found this information in. Retrieved, which will be today's date, meaning that we checked that the data was there today. And then the Library of Congress Authority ID, where we will put the ID number that can be found in the identifiers section of the Wikidata item again, saying this is where we got this information from. I did look through a number of examples, and this seemed to be the most thorough and accurate way of citing things from the Library of Congress Authority file. So that's what we're doing. Okay, so to start, I will choose stated in as my first property. And as we mentioned before, Wikidata is a big bag of stuff where everything links together. So in addition to things like people, there are also things like books and databases. So in this case, we are going to state that the date of death is stated in the Library of Congress authorities. If your person does not have the death date, please just feel free to pick somebody else. Okay, we are not in a position where we can update any of the LC records right now, but please just go ahead and pick somebody else. Yes, somebody should have. Oh, okay. I don't know what is considered best practice either. We can have multiple data points, as we saw with occupation. It makes more sense for someone to have multiple occupations and multiple death dates. But records are sometimes variable, and maybe something has been published in different ways about when they died. I did my best, but I could not go through every single one of these individually. So please just feel free to grab somebody else if yours is not working out. And Adam has shared that he uses a script that allows you to click on a button at the identifier and then click a button that at the property that adds the stated in value and identifier and viewed on date. That is awesome. We will talk about this more at the end. Yes, we will be doing a gadgets session in 2 weeks. Yes. In 2 weeks or in 1 week? 2 weeks. Okay. Well, then I'm all mixed up. Okay. That's fine. That's just my own calendar in my head. Yes,
No, I think you're
gadgets.
right, Kyla. It's August 5th.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, summer months sometimes feel like they're all stretched out and very long, but I think that is next week. This is kind of an off schedule for the LD4 Wikidata Affinity group, but we are excited to be participating in this conference, and took advantage of the opportunity to reach a lot of library folks here. Yes. Okay. So we can continue to add other properties within this reference. So our next one would be retrieved. Yes. And when you click on retrieved as your option, I think this should be one of the ones that pops up when you just open up the reference one. If it's not, you can just start typing and Wikidata will narrow down your options as you type, which I think we will have to look for in the next example. But retrieved is pretty standard, and then it auto-populates with today's date. You can also edit this date if you checked it at a different time, but for today, that should be good enough. And then for our third statement, we want to click Add again, add a reference. And for this new property, it's not on the list of the commonly used ones, so we'll have to type it in. If you type LCCN, it will give you two choices, and the one we want is the Library of Congress Authority ID, property 244. You can also type in the property PID here, so P244 will pull up the property we're looking for today. And then in the values box, you can paste in the LC Authority ID from the identifier section of the person's Wikidata page. Once you have made all three of these statements in the reference, you want to click on Publish up near the date itself. And that will save the work that you have just done and improves the statement here in Wikidata because it now has a reference. Part of what we are going to be talking about with EMCO, I think, is the value of references and making sure that the information we state about our entities is, in fact, authoritative. So this was just an exercise to practice citing things and do some sort of really easy editing. Okay. We are going to be talking about creating brand new Wikidata items on the August 19th and September 2 LD4 Wikidata Affinity group sessions. So please attend those for more information about this kind of work. And we also have lots of resources about this out there that Susan will talk about at the end of this presentation. One more thing to mention is that when you are editing, if you ever feel confused about the properties that you're seeing or the properties in an application profile, it can be helpful to take a look at the actual property pages. This is partly why we went with just adding a reference for this workshop. It's very applicable to many properties. We don't have to learn too much about it. But to learn more about a property, you can click on its blue link here and it will take you to the property page for it. And you can also look them up using this kind of format, wikidata.org/wiki/property:"P" and then the property ID. And that is sometimes a really helpful way to get useful information here. So it tells you maybe don't include the educated at property for living people for whom it may violate their privacy. And so there are some further information available on those pages. This protection class here kind of flags one of the things that we might want to take a look at around ethical and privacy concerns when editing Wikidata. You may see properties such as sex or gender or ethnic group or sometimes even date of birth, where people don't necessarily want that publicly available on the internet for everybody to discover. So the values in these properties need to be entered with care and respect for the person being described, and often require a source where the person has self-identified as such, which can't always be found. But this is a newer policy, and there are many, many items out there with these properties that have not been looked at yet. So while Wikidata is a free tool, we still want to consider best practices and professional care while using it. Okay, and I'm going to send it back to Alex now to take a look at evaluating an item.
Awesome. So just before we go, Kyla, just because we have a little bit of time, I think,
Oh,
there
sure.
were a couple of questions. Was there anything else that you wanted to elaborate on, or are there any quick questions
Oh,
about the how-to of editing? Nothing in particular. But yeah, for folks who couldn't edit on the spot today because maybe the item already had a field or the records were missing, then please feel free to pretty much repeat it, but with a different item. Or if you see a different property that you want to try editing with, the features are pretty much the same. So just
yes.
wanted to make that clear quickly before we go. Okay,
Yes,
so
thank you.
I will head over to the evaluation part. Okay, so this is the other fun part of Wikidata editing. So it's with items that are, with properties that are pretty much just missing. That's one thing, because then you might just like go and notice, oh, that's something that I need to add. Other things that we might consider in terms of editing items are the following. So just going from the top here, accuracy. So are these statements accurate? So actually, a couple of folks already mentioned sometimes the death date is not accurate, or there might be multiple records. So that's something that we might have as a consideration. I will say it may be your emotional range may go anywhere from total joy to absolute frustration at how inaccurate a Wikidata record can be. As we mentioned, it's a completely open database. Anybody can put anything they want, and in a field that understands the importance of controlled information, I think we understand what that can mean. So accuracy will raise a little flag about that. It's important to see if they are accurate. Sourcing helps a lot. We might also sometimes have to list multiple values just because there are multiple possibilities based on different sources. Appropriate, consistent, and complete description. So there are a bunch of questions related to this. So we'll go from the top. Are all the properties and values appropriate and consistently applied across items? Should any statements be qualified or ranked? Should any other properties be included? So an example might be if sometimes if there's like a property that's applied consistently, it might not also always be appropriate to include anyway. So sometimes these concerns kind of run into each other and we have to like make a judgment. If there are statements that are only true during specific time periods, for example, those might be some statements that we might want to qualify or rank. And should any other properties be included, that might be another judgment call that we have to make. So those are some of the things that come with this consideration. And the last little part is multilingual support. So especially if you're able to edit in multiple languages, this is great to keep in mind. Okay, so let's take a look at examples for each. This is a college in the University of Toronto. And for anybody who's familiar with our system, we have a hugely decentralized university that's made up of, I should probably know how many colleges we actually have, but there's also different kinds of colleges. So some colleges are part of the governance of University of Toronto proper, and count as basically the same institution. Some other colleges, like actually the college on the right, is the federated college. So they are more of almost an affiliated institution that counts as part of U of T. So in these situations, for example, if Innis College happens to be described as a federated college of the University of Toronto, that would not actually be an accurate value. Hence, we have over here constituent college as the instance of. Both of these are obviously university colleges, so those would be accurate. in St. Michael's College, as I just mentioned, this is actually more an affiliated school. So it might, in fact, take a little bit of searching, because in this case, I did try to, I think, look for an entry for Federated College, and I'm not sure that I found it, but this would basically fit the bill. So these are some of the judgment calls that you might have to make on accuracy. Okay, and sourcing. This was fairly straightforward. It's the reference URL. Kyle also just took us through the stated in and the different options for adding a reference for different values. And qualifying considerations in terms of appropriateness. So let's say, are all properties and values appropriate? One example that often comes up might be birthplace, sexual orientation, ethnic group. Some of these can be just, there is data out there sometimes, but we don't necessarily even want to list it. Also with the just general very anti-LGBTQ climate, for example, like because this is an open database, often people are extracting data, and to make that process easy can also be a fairly, it's too bad that we just can't have like a lovely database that nobody's going to do anything with. So because again, these are the compromises that we make with an open situation like this, we do want to exercise some judgment about like how much private information we are getting into with the things that we edit. So should any statements be qualified or ranked in addition to any of those like sort of more private fields? Yeah, and this might be the time-based example that I've given before. Trying to remember exactly what the detail was of, like, I think this was like Mount Everest, and it only really started being called that because it was named after, and then that applies to a specific start time, because otherwise it would be ahistorical, or it wouldn't have been true before 1865. So there are things like this that come with the question of appropriateness. And completeness. So somebody mentioned gadgets before. We will have a closer look at gadgets soon. But that's the little snippet on the right that you're seeing here. So some tools that we can use for editing make it really easy to see what other stuff there is to edit. In this case, this is something called Recoin, and it gives you, in situations where there were similar or comparable items, this was other properties that people tended to add. And then it gives you like a little percentage of like how many items it kind of shows. And so it makes it much easier to think of other things to add. So there are tools like this. And the other real cool tool is, you should absolutely go to this link. This is the application profile. So application profile. I'm probably going to repeat that term a couple of times in the next couple of minutes. This is sort of the standardization tool, the standardization method for everything that we're trying to do in Wikidata. Because if we're all doing our individual things, we can't sync it up. So for EMCO, there's already an application profile. Some of these are probably going to be like in progress anyway. So there are discussions started. There will be more discussions about like how to develop it so that it keeps on getting better and better. So look to the link, and whenever you're editing anything around, for example, EMCO persons, this is the link that you want to go to and be like, okay, so these are the fields that I'm going to be engaging in. With the rest of the fields, maybe the judgment was that we don't need to do that, or like we decided not to do that for some reason or another. And then I am seeing a couple of questions in the chat, but we will come back to some of these. For example, the one about ranking, I'll just wrap up with the evaluation section here. So thank you for the questions. So consistency, this obviously matters for info retrieval. So one more thing that we wanted to note in terms of like this being an open database, like everybody searches differently, right? So sometimes like we might be, let's say that we're trying to query, okay, I just want to know, aside from Jean Augustine, like who are the other, let's say, Canadian politicians who have received like certain awards. And if there were multiple ways to enter that query in terms of values, then it might get confusing sometimes if a value is listed for one person but not another. So in situations like this, the application profile might then opt to provide both entries to simplify the search, or sometimes like it might decide that, you know what, a certain value is too repetitive and it's like, therefore we should pretty much just make it obsolete. So that might be a judgment call that comes through the community. And in this case, a scholar might just be both university teacher and an academic, because the two have slightly different meanings and they're both appropriate for this situation. So that's the consistency piece. And one more fun example that I will just kind of punt over to another future discussion coming down the EMCO pipeline. Names are another big one. So as we know, I already got it. I don't know. I don't know that it's everybody. I've had like 5 names throughout my life. Not for any sketchy purpose, I promise. But like, so I might be an example of somebody who's like had many aliases just because like I've lived in multiple places and like my Korean name is not my English name, etc. So same for example, Chance the Rapper. Might go by Chance, Mr. Bennett, Chancellor Bennett. His full name is Chancellor Jonathan Bennett. So all of these can go into the alias field, but guess what? There are also multiple properties available for names. So there's name and native language name, birth name, which tends to be the whole string. Given name, which doesn't break it down into first and middle names or anything like that, but it does give like a series ordinal, so you can kind of specify the order. There's a family name that you can also add, so it can get pretty complex. All of that to say, at the moment, I think in the application profile, there isn't a specific recommendation around any of the specific fields to add. Right now, it suffices for the persons to add as a label, because as long as people can search it and get to it, the name is the name. But I will also defer this to a future discussion, unless either Kyla or Susan, you also wanted to jump in here. Yeah, okay, cool. So that's the little names example. Okay, and multilingual. So is data available in multiple languages? This is actually a really cool example because SARS-CoV-2, obviously an entire pandemic, it's going to happen in pretty much like many, many places, if not all the places. And as you can see, the data is available sort of to varying degrees in different languages. So you can kind of see here the multilingual options that are on Wikidata at the moment. And if we could go to the next one. And the really cool thing, because Wikidata, again, is like this open, community-based knowledge base, lots of folks might be doing a lot of really cool, in this case, open science, like community projects around putting together Wikidata queries that make it much easier to link up the data and stay on top of research. So this is an example of a page that says Wikidata queries around the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. And then there might be a whole bunch of contents, and all of these, depending on how it's sort of coded, might auto-translate, but that might only happen as long as the multilingual entries are actually in there in Wikidata. So anything that you put in Wikidata in this way, if somebody happens to be working on it in this sort of fashion, would have a direct impact in pretty much what is available in the other languages. So wanted to give this a little example, and that's another consideration that you have if you have that capacity to be multilingual. Okay, so do you want to try taking a look at Wikidata item? This is where you can be as judgy as you want. So you're going to find a Wikidata item for a person or a corporate body of your choice. So you might hop to, these are some big entries like United Nations, Elena Filatova, Stanislav Rudy. So any of these, or it's maybe just somebody that you know, maybe like your favorite music artist. So take a look through the item. I would also say try taking a look also at the application profile. So that might trigger some thoughts in terms of, oh, I see some things here, I don't see some things here. So we'll take a little bit of time for this briefly. And please share your thoughts in the chat. Once we see about 3 or 4 messages, maybe, yeah, we'll proceed to the next session.
If you're at a loss for who to look at, you could also look at the item you were editing earlier, because they were varying degrees of complete, I would say, those ones.
inviting a comment or two about anything anybody notices in chat about the Wikidata item that you're looking at.
We're starting to get some comments that night. That's awesome. I was going to point out that I was seeing gender for a lot of these people with no references when I was building the list, which is not great practice. But that's an example of past practice that maybe we want to think more critically about these days. Honestly, a lot of things with no references.
Thanks for that, and these are all great comments. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like with the whole sourcing thing too, it definitely impacts accuracy because we just don't know. Yeah. How about should we head over to the last section of this? I can pass it over.
I think so.
Okay, hi. So these are just some other resources. Again, I can't show you these links, but you can click from the slides. You can see a lot more information about EMCO and those application profiles. There's an email address for you to contact, or contact each other even, I think, write about EMCO and Wikidata. The next slide. This is the LD4 Wikidata Affinity group, and we're very happy to be partnering with EMCO. There's a lot of information there. You can see there are these tabs. You can see a lot of our past programming under Affinity group calls and working hours, and the Wikibase working hours. You can also click into our events tab, which is not shown here, and that will take you to the projects series. And you can see that we do have these upcoming sessions. Next week, Wikidata User Scripts and Gadgets, Hillary Thorson and I will be leading that, and we will be writing to you sometime this week to publicize it and to ask you to bring along your examples of your favorite scripts and gadgets, like some of the ones we've seen in the chat here. And then we'll have these great sessions on persons and corporate bodies where you'll get to do some hands-on stuff with Kyla and others.
Can I just interrupt for a
Yes,
section there? We are
please.
still looking for people who would be interested in leading the corporate body session. So I know we have some experts in the room today. So please get in touch with the EMCO Wikidata Google Group email if you are interested.
Great. So a lot to look forward to, a lot of information out there. The next slide, I think, gives us even more links. And you can see some of the current Wikidata Wiki projects and click into them. And there's just a lot of material there and people you can contact if you want to be involved. And is there one more slide? Just thanks. We're all very thankful to you for coming today, and thanks for the 5-minute warning, Mark. Discovery is next. You're going to want to go to that too. And thanks so much to Alex and Kyla for being such wonderful presenters with me, and thanks to the Zoom host and co-mods.
Thank you,
I think we got
Susan.
through most of the questions that were in the chat, but if we did not answer your question, please reach out. We're on the Slack, the LD4 Slack, and here's our emails. Yeah.
We have an extra 4 minutes, so if anyone wants to get in the questions now, we can do that. But thank you so much for your talk. That was really wonderful.
Yeah, and it's true. In at the LD4 Slack, you can reach any of us individually. You can also ask questions in the Wikidata channel. And I also just want to say about the Wikidata Affinity group, we love have people. It's for the whole community. It's completely open, and we love having other people involved. You can come to our monthly coordination meetings and just watch or get involved to whatever degree is right for you.